Hi, Misha here, and throughout 2022, as Eaglemoss dissolved and now seems to have been bought, at least in part, and may come back eventually. I've been covering various ship lines, and I did the Klingons, looking at Enterprise and Discovery, and I intended to do the Next Generation, DS9, all that. Recorded a video a few months ago, but the intro got accidentally deleted on the camera. So I'm recording a fresh intro here. Just brought out the XL Katinga for it. Why not? It's probably one of my favorite, maybe my favorite of the XLs from Eaglemoss. Which maybe one day, although it will take months, maybe even years, will come back. But in the interim, we can have reminiscence, a retrospective on what they did bring us. Because, for a decade, we did get Star Trek ships from them, so. But in this video, we'll look at the ones from the movies, like the Katinga, the Bird of Prey, which of course carry directly on to the Next Generation, DS9, and even Voyager. Now, I did record that video a while back, so it'll be with the old camera, but at least we do have mic sound. As always, if you could, please do like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. And with no further ado, let's go to Misha from the past. So, first up, the Katinga, which might not first seem like it fits, but it actually really much does. As I'm sure you know, and from past videos, this first was featured in the motion picture, carried over to Star Trek II, and then would disappear from the films for a while until Star Trek VI. And this was basically meant to be a film version of the D7, although in current canon and lore, it's a different model. It's about 214 meters long. And when you consider a lot of that as the neck, the 400 some odd crewmen are crammed in quite tight. It has disruptors and forward and rear torpedo bays, and is pretty much just a warship. Early versions were not cloaked, but they would start to get cloaks in the 2280s, give or take. And then the cloak was further upgraded in the 2290s and the early 24th century. But this was the standard battle cruiser into the Next Generation era. In the first season of TNG, we see this. It follows into season 2, and it's the only major Klingon ship we see for a while. Of course, it would get replaced by newer models, but even in Deep Space Nine, they call this an old battlecruiser, but they have been upgraded during the Klingon expansion and Dominion War, getting more powerful disruptors. They're kind of a reddish color, and they have at least 6 of them, maybe as many as 8, and further improved cloaks and improvements to the engines. That said, they're still second line or escort vessels. They're not considered really that up to date, but needs must. As far as from Eaglemoss, the model is a nice one. As I've said before, it was technically my first one, and a pretty good introduction. The back is metal, the neck and head are plastic, and it's a decent size. Of course, in previous videos, you've seen the XL version, which is quite impressive, all things considered. Very much an iconic Klingon ship, and very much into the 24th century. Next up, we have the original Klingon Bird of Prey, the Burrell class. This is an escort vessel, a scout vessel, a raiding vessel. So, very analogous to ships we saw in Enterprise. This was never featured in the original series. It appeared in Star Trek III for the first time with an interesting lineage. And these, in my mind, kind of represent the Burrell as we saw it. Either wings up in a landed position or wings down in an attack position. Now, the studio model had variable geometry wings, I guess we could say. But since Eaglemoss models were always kind of fixed, They didn't really do movement in hardly any of their models. I had some lights in them, but yeah, I'm having a hard time thinking of any that move. Yeah, they did one. Now the one with wings down in the attack position was in the standard collection. The one with wings up and the gear out was a bonus issue. And if the landing pads look too big to fit in, well, don't blame them. That's how it was in the show, too. They're nice, although a bit repetitive. This is probably, outside of some of the key Federation ships, the most repeated model or toy made in the Star Trek line. So they had to do it, but yeah, it's almost like these, but they did a good job. It's mostly metal. The wing is metal with some of the detailing. The only thing about these, some people have very brittle disruptors, so be mindful of that. Now the Burrell is the small one, about 75 meters, with a crew of only about 12, although I'm sure it could hold more. Has 2 heavy disruptors, forward facing, 1 photon launcher, forward facing, and cloak as standard. Sometimes it's also referred to as the D12. But this small scout version definitely carries on into the 24th century and was produced in large numbers. And because of Star Trek 4, we see interior and all that of one. And considering how often the model was reused, you can't really blame Eaglemoss for doing a few versions of it. Not bad, but not exactly exciting, frankly, because we've had so many birds of prey over the years, and as I've said in multiple videos, it was kind of reused a lot in the show. That said, when Eaglemoss started the collection, they did their best to make the bird of prey a little different. This is issue 3, and it has the wings in the horizontal position, which is less common than the others, especially the wings in the attack. The real-world reason why many of the birds of prey featured in TNG and DS9 were this style was that the model's movement feature was essentially broken, so they fixed the wings in one spot halfway between. This was meant to be the crew's position, but I actually like it. I think it spreads out, looks mean, and it's just kind of a jack of all trades. I just think it makes it quite big. And I like how they just very slightly sweep up. They're not perfectly straight out. Now this to me represents the Cavort class, something that seems to appear in the 24th century and is the larger version. It's either classed as a cruiser or a destroyer. It's about 150 meters long, so double, and has a crew of at least 30, sometimes 50. Again, this is where you get into the size and consistency of the bird of prey, so take it with a grain of salt. Whereas the Burrell is small and kind of old in Next Generation, this seems to be a premier battleship. Small, but punchy, kind of analogous to the Defiant. And we see a lot of these during the Dominion War. But again, I think Eaglemoss did a perfectly good job with this model. It is quite interesting. And obviously something you've got to have in a Star Trek collection. So of the 3 wing position models, this is my favorite, and it's the first one we got. Next up, the Vorcha. This is what appeared about midway through Next Generation when the budget was increased and they could afford to make a new physical model. And that finally let them kind of get away from the Katinga. It's a replacement. In universe, it's quite a bit bigger, about 480 some odd meters, with a larger crew, more modern cloak, typical top speeds for that day and time, torpedoes, disruptors. It does have a large, heavy disruptor kind of in the nose. Unfortunately, we don't really get to see a lot of these. They are quickly relegated to background ships. Sometimes it's referred to as, instead of a battle cruiser, an attack cruiser. So it's a if not exactly toe-to-toe match with the Galaxy, it's in the running. It could definitely stomp Excelsior, frankly. And I'm glad that Klingons finally got a new ship, so there wasn't just Katingas and Birds of Prey. And Eaglemoss did a really good job with this model too. I think most everyone agrees, considering how small it is, the detailing and everything is top notch. I would have loved to have had an XL version of this. The XL Katinga was nice, so I think one of these would have been a good addition, but again, it was just so quickly relegated. Around 2365, it was the Chancellor's flagship, but it only held that position for a few years before it seemed like it was just more of a mass production ship, and I don't know. But I do like that it carries on the D7/Katinga heritage, but still doing its own new thing. And very distinctly Klingon. But that can't really be said for our next couple of ships. The Merchantman. Now, you might think this is a human or unaligned or whatever ship, and it started off that way. In Star Trek 3, this was one of the many new models they built for that film and would reuse over and over. Ironically, this physical model is bigger than the Boreal Bird of Prey, but in the show it's smaller. We really don't have a good size for it, though, because it's, again, inconsistent. But the Klingon use of it actually comes in Deep Space Nine when they paint it green and they load about 450 people on board, and they give it a cloak, turning into a passenger transport, and then let Worf blow it out of the stars. So if you wanted, you could take this model, paint it green, give it a Klingon symbol, or you could just break it apart and blow it up and say it's after Worf played with it. And that, it seems to be a bigger ship, around 150 meters, and to fit over 400 people on board, it would kind of need to be. It was just a reuse of the Merchantman because it was a snap in the show. But this is a model that we see Cardassians use, we see it other, so that doesn't offend me. That's fine. I just wanted to bring it out because this is one of Eaglemoss's better attempts. It's a really good size, good a bit of metal, good a bit of detailing, and its connection with Klingons was there from the beginning when the Merchantman was smuggling for the, well, I was going to say Dr. Brown, you know what I mean. And I think most of us were really happy when this came in the collection. We had to wait, I think it was issue 140 something. It was getting on towards the end, and it finally came out, and it was one of the best efforts, I'd say. Background ship, kind of just one of those things that makes the universe feel more full and alive. And so I thought I'd bring it out today. Why not? Give the Klingons a little more oomph. Now, this truly is a background ship, and this really could be argued not to be Klingon. In fact, it started off as the Permilian battlecruiser. But, alright, with this one, there could be a good argument made for this not being Klingon. But why not? Now, this is labeled as the Permilian battlecruiser from Booby Trap Season 3, but even then, it's not where it started. It actually started off in a whole different series, V, and then was reused by TNG. Again, studio models were very time-consuming and expensive to make, so anytime sci-fi shows could share them, they would. I liked that episode, and I always liked this design. It came out very close to the Merchantman, and again, I was very tickled when it came out, and again, I think it's one of their better models. But in Deep Space Nine, it was reused briefly as a background ship for Nogra from the Klingon who was coming to get Kern and take him home. I'm sure they just threw it in. It actually looks very big in the shot, 500 meters or more. And one could argue that it was just another ship. One thing is for sure, the model was reused on Deep Space Nine. Whether there were Klingons on board or someone else, who knows. I doubt they were Permilians, so I doubt it was meant to be a Permilian rather way. So with that out of the way, it does have a Klingon aesthetic to it. We've got the big in the back. We've got the engines on the sides. We've got the sticking, and I think it works fine. So we'll call it a civilian transport or house ship, because they say they're a respectable but smaller house, so maybe it's in the older ship Discovery era, who knows. But it's a nice model, and it's things like this that no one else ever did except Eaglemoss. I don't know if there's any other Pavilion battlecruiser models out there. What do you think? Just that I bring it out, why not? Again, it's kind of one of my favorites. Here we have the newest one, the Toron Shuttle, seen in Season 7 of TNG. And this is a rework, given Klingon paint and hull detailing of a very often reused model. It's been several things in the series. It's about 3.5 meters long, can carry a couple of people, but can be operated by just one. Just a shuttle. But this was the only shuttle pack we had of alien ships, so that's kind of special. And a Klingon shuttle, finally. We don't really see many of those. We did get a Romulan shuttle in the series, but first Klingon. It's actually very heavy, and it's actually a good size. It's only entirely metal, which is kind of plastic where needed, but it's got a good weight. The only thing is it likes to slide off its stand. It's not going to slide off on a shelf, but if you bump it, on the other hand, unless it falls a great distance, there's not a lot to break off of it, so, oh well. In the show, we see this piloted by Coral, but we can presume it's a more or less standard Klingon shuttle. It fits them. Boxy, kind of ugly, kind of utilitarian, but it gets the job done. It was actually this and the Ferengi shuttle that got me to buy that shuttle pack. So I'm glad I have it, and I'm glad it goes with my Klingon fleet. And that gets us to our final one, and perhaps, unfortunately, our worst. I'm talking, of course, about the Negvar. This came relatively early in the collection, and the design's not bad. It actually started off as a heavy modification of the Vorcha for the end of Next Generation, All Good Things. And sometimes called the Voudier, or the Imperial class. And then it was further modified for a short time later for the Season 4 opener of Deep Space Nine into the Negvar here. They removed a few spikes and they added some weapons pods, kind of just making it look better. And it is a big ship in the universe, over 680 meters long, with a crew of up to 1,800, plus even soldiers. Like the Vorcha, it has a heavy disruptor in the front, probably for planetary bombardment or attacking fortifications, stations. Then it has multiple beam and pulse disruptors, multiple torpedo launchers, multiple shuttles, and other small support craft. It was basically designed as a flagship, a command ship, and quite frankly to be a little ostentatious. So it's said that in universe the production numbers were very low but consistent. Basically when a house would get big enough, they might order a couple of these. The Chancellor and other members of the High Council might have one as their personal ship. It was a status symbol. It had a lot of firepower, it had a lot of shielding and armor, but it was not terribly maneuverable, and it wasn't the fastest thing in the world. So, and I'm sure it cost a lot to build and operate. So why do I say it's maybe the worst? Well, the model itself. They made a few mistakes, but the biggest one really just being back here. There's kind of a concave area that we really don't see on any other Eaglemoss. It's like they just forgot a piece there that was supposed to go in. And same here for the back of the nacelles. And that's odd for Eaglemoss. They don't typically do that. You see that on some toys or different things. But it feels a little incomplete, like a couple of pieces were meant to go in. So this would have been a good one to have a reissue of. By the way, these weapons pods on the bottom were added with the Negvar. The original TNG version didn't have them. A variant also appears in in-game, the end episode of Voyager, which is another slight modification. But yeah, Eaglemoss, I don't know what happened here. That happens occasionally. This would have been one that I really would have liked to have seen in a special edition, an XL, or at least a special size, kind of like the sarcophagus ship. Maybe not quite that huge, but yeah. I think scaling up a bit where it looks larger than the Vorcha would look good and kind of play good. At least we did get the Star Trek Online version of this ship, and it does look a lot better, so there's that. It's a shame, you know, from the top and front, it's fine. It's just from kind of the bottom and back, it looks a little janky. And because it was such a big ship in the show, when you scale it down this far, some stuff just kind of gets lost. But it seems like in Deep Space Nine you saw this a few times, but for most of the show they just kind of relied on the bird of prey. I think that's when I kind of got tired of it, with the Vorcha and the Negvar around. And it's kind of funny that they never made even one new Klingon ship for Deep Space Nine, even when they got into the CGI era. You'd think as often as they featured the Klingons, and the Cardassians had a couple of new ships, the Hideki and the Kelvin. Oh well, plus they had the weapons platform. I don't hate it. I definitely am still glad I have it, but it feels like the model just was a little undercooked. But again, while most everyone does the Katinga and the Bird of Prey, and there's even a fair number of Vorchas out there, there are practically no Negvars, especially in a relatively small die-cast collectible scale. So in the end, I guess take what you can get, right? Because it might be all we're ever going to get now. Let's wrap things up. Well, I appreciate you hanging out with me. This kind of wraps up everything we pretty much have seen for Klingons. And Eaglemoss pretty much gave us everything except for some of the background Discovery Klingon ships. But we have all the Enterprise ships, we have all the Next Generation, as few as there actually were. And aside from maybe variants of the Negvar, all those are here as well. So I guess going forward, we'll see what happens or doesn't next. So I'd like to know what you think about these or the collection in general. This is Misha. Catch you very soon next time.